Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, in any walk of life, it's vital to have the right people doing the right jobs, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals. We pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational way. And, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because, quite honestly, you're listening right now. And if you are, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button on your podcast provider of choice. Give us the like, the old 5-star rating, whatever it takes. We're available pretty much everywhere over at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, we're on the Instagram, we're on the TikTok, and we're on the Letterboxd for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because if we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please pay us a visit. On this episode, we are diving into the world of television. Streaming television, it is as you would expect, and it's the hit show on Apple TV Plus, Shrinking, starring the one and only Jason Segel and Harrison Ford. I don't know if you've had a chance to sign up for Apple Plus or watch it yet, but this show is absolutely hilarious. It is so much fun. And, a big part of that is due to the work of the casting directors. And we had the unique pleasure of sitting down with the one and only Benner and Debby Romano to talk about the process of casting therein for a hilarious show like that, and having relationships with the showrunners, because this show, which is of a grieving therapist who defies his training and tells his clients exactly what's on his mind, is just one of those things that's hilarious, and it's funny, and it's such a great approach to sort of the grieving process. In many ways, it's probably one of the more human shows that we've seen in quite some time. But like I said, a lot of that is due to the casting. So enjoy our conversation with Brett and Debby first. But make sure you go check out Shrinking, which is available now on Apple TV Plus. But like I said, as always, enjoy our conversation first with Brett and Debby, because between you and me, it's a darn good one. Now, just to kick it off officially, Debby, Brett, thank you so much for the time today. And congratulations on your work on Shrinking. It's such a funny show.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Now, I've got to ask, and this is probably the loaded question, but it's one I really have to bring up, because it feels like, you're sitting in whatever offices you have, and you're talking about people for certain parts. It feels like why don't we ask Harrison Ford is probably the joke that you tell yourselves while sitting in one of these rooms, just to sort of keep saying, walk me through sort of your process and getting someone like Harrison on board with this show, because obviously he's so great in the part.
It's a pretty easy answer, if you don't mind me taking it, Brett.
No, take.
So we were asked to do a list for the character of Paul, and because this is an Apple show, we knew we could reach for the stars, so to speak. And go for the pie in the sky. And so Harrison was on our list. And we don't actually have offices, so our,
does anybody post COVID anymore?
Huh?
Does anybody post COVID anymore?
I know, and it's so weird, but it is what it is, and we'll see what happens with all of that. But it's not ideal, but there are workarounds. And right. So Brett and I, we worked on our list separately, and then we call each other and we call them together with, and we're, I think, because we've been a team for over 20 years, we're really good at, telling the other person, I should say, like when we think something does belong on a list or doesn't, and we respect each other's opinions for keeping everything in check. But Harrison was on our list, and we had a conference call before we really started casting the whole show about that role. And there were, I guess, like 5 or 6 names that were plucked from that list as the ones to shoot for and find out more information on them. Because when we put this list together, we did check with agents to see if people were, open to TV or whatever that was. And these days, a lot of agents will say, even for someone like Harrison, he's open for the right role.
Right.
With the right team. So Bill Lawrence went ahead and said, listen, this list of 5 or 6 people is great, but there's one person I want to take a run at. And he happens to be my neighbor. And you're going to think I'm crazy, but I want to go after Harrison Ford. And it's going to take a long time because he's a busy guy. And we were all like, oh, okay. And I mean, Brett and I are huge Harrison Ford fans.
Right.
So listen, if there's a time to go take a run at him, it's for this kind of show. And Bill did his thing, and it was miraculous. I don't know how else to put it, except he pulled it off.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, my next question, and this is something I'm always curious about, because you both have experience with Bill, and I can imagine there's a certain degree of secondhand in terms of working relationship. How does that help your process when it comes to putting together lists and doing work like this? Because I can imagine it's got to be easier when you kind of know what the person's already going to want rather than when you're going in blind on a different project.
I think it helps from a standpoint of, well, I can only give it to you by example in the beginning. Ted McGinley was somebody who we've had around forever. And way back in the day when we cast the Scrubs pilot, Ted McGinley was one of the 2 choices that we were testing for Dr. Cox in Scrubs against John McGinley. And so Bill has always liked Ted. We've always tried to find a place to use Ted. And when this role came up, it just seemed kind of serendipitous. And I remember Debbie saying, like, don't you think it's time that we finally use Ted McGinley? And so that's the kind of great shorthand that he's like, yes, let's make a run at that and let's try that. But there's always, yes, and we do have definitely, there's a shorthand, and you certainly know the personality of the person that you're dealing with. But he throws enough curveballs in the best way to us to keep us on our toes. And certainly, I think what Debbie and I, our job is always finding fresh and interesting people for him to glom onto. The great thing about Bill is he does like many, I think, of these producers who have long and illustrious careers, they have a stable of actors that they love to go to for certain things and then move out from there. So I guess, and Deb, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I look at part of our job with Bill, we always say, here's new people to introduce to you, hopefully, that he'll gravitate towards. And I certainly think with this, many of those patients were people that they didn't know before. Some of them we didn't know before. We, read so many of those patients. And then we were lucky enough to discover people like, in terms of for this role, Luke Tenney, who I personally didn't know. Debbie knew Lakita from Generations on HBO, but I hadn't seen the show. So yes, to answer your question in a very long way, there are certain things that are definitely a shorthand. And certainly after working with somebody for so long, how they work and how the process is going to be, which obviously is very helpful. And it's very nice to be so loyal.
For sure.
Now, I've got to ask, because, on the outside looking in, it always feels like your job really in many ways is having to be a champion for the actors. And I can imagine that it's tough because, on one end, you can fall in love with certain people and certain performances, but they may not necessarily be right for a certain project. And conversely, I can imagine you have to sift through actors maybe even trying to ingratiate themselves to you in a way that doesn't necessarily work for what's going on at the moment. How do you guys sort of parse through all that?
Well, I'm trying to get to the crux of your question. Let's go back to the championing of actors. So I feel like there are different ways that we go about doing that. And sometimes it's literally just putting someone in front of someone's face and seeing what comes back. And if they have the reaction that we did, and then if they don't, then we can start to push. Well, we really liked them because XYZ. And is there something that you would like to see different? Because we think they're capable of that. I think that there are certain actors, like when we get to the screen test portion of things, where if Brett and I know what the studio and network are going to want to see, as far as hitting certain jokes or playing certain levels of a scene, and we think the actor hasn't hit it in the screen test, which, you know, for Shrinking, it was a Zoom screen test. We'll speak up and we'll be like, can we try it one more time, and give them some direction? And sometimes that involves speaking over Bill, some of the other producers, maybe the director, you know, and it's a little iffy, and you're not sure how in or out they are on an actor, because you can't really read, you know, body language as easily on Zoom. But at the end of the day, we have a job to do, and we're fighting for the actor. And so we will speak up. And if it takes a couple of extra minutes of people's time, that's what it does, because we want to see them at least put their best foot forward so that they have a fighting chance. And if it doesn't go their way eventually, and it's a different choice that ends up in the role, then that's what happens. But I think it's our responsibility to open the gate and allow them to do what we think they're capable of.
Okay.
There was a second part to your question, though. Can you?
I mean, really kind of specifically almost to the idea, because, I mean, honestly, on a show like this, they're spending long hours together. People have to sort of have a good working relationship. I mean, if you run into an actor who is, you know, crazy talented, but, you know, may have a personality dysfunction with producer X, how do you guys sort of navigate that?
We don't, first of all, sometimes you don't know. I mean, and that is harder. You know, I can say specifically with Bill, working with Bill, since this is the context, he's always been really wonderful about, in a producer session, taking a moment to talk to the actor, to get a sense of who they are, okay. Just to, you know, it used to be when we were doing live sessions, people would wait sometimes a long time to get into the room because he would take that time. But when they got into the room, they understood why it was taking the time that it was taking, because he wanted to figure out effectively if this person was going to be a jerk or not. But you don't know. And we've had instances of things that have happened. Once people have been hired, you find out very quickly, and that kind of disseminates from the top right down. If there's something going on the set with an actor, we're going to hear about it almost immediately. But, you know, we've been lucky enough that we've been able to weed out people in an audition situation that have done particular things or done outrageous behaviors or something that have led us to believe something's off here, or like, let's steer clear of this person. That's happened as well, but that's more the exception to the rule, and those are more the people who, you know, you have an anecdotal story about, remember that time we were doing this and that person did this. That's what happens there. Generally speaking, I think actors are on their best behavior, and everybody wants to also, everybody, I want to say this to express too, as much as it's an actor's job to kind of show themselves in their best light, the same is for the other side of it too. Because if I'm an actor going into a room, I want to be sure that the producers, the writers, the people that are going to be helping create a character that I'm going to be helping to bring to life, that I'm going to like them as well. So it is a two-way street, I think.
No, I can see that, because I mean, it's just that sort of that personality sort of conflict has always kind of fascinated me, because I mean, obviously we've seen stories in the news before, you know, actor X gets fired off, you know, show Y, but is replaced with actor Z very quickly. Like for you guys, when you're doing a job like this, I've got to imagine having plan B and having plan C kind of ready at the go is vital before you can even step into the room to really start finalizing things.
Well, if you mean in terms of a replacement, no. I mean, the biggest thing we've had to kind of contend with in the last couple of years is COVID.
Right.
And in terms of, we've really tried to stress to our producers, you need to pick more than one choice for each role. Not as much the series regulars, but for any guest stars, for any co-stars. I can't tell you how many people that they go in to test them before they come on, and they're like, they're positive, you need to go to your next choice. And once we had both the person doing it and the backup, both were positive. So you had to go further. So that was very, very rampant for a while. So, but if an actor has a particular reputation, that stuff gets around regardless. Right. Everyone's to learn that. You either start to, if it's someone of note, to make your producers aware, you should know that this person, and everybody kind of, enough producers, I think, as a team, does due diligence if there's something that's been said about someone to kind of see what a reputation is like, if there is a sense that there could be a reputation. Okay. That's certainly, I think, gets discussed.
No, that's
no, and sometimes not even privy. That kind of thing sometimes happens behind what Debbie and I are even privy to. I mean, we're just hearing after sometimes of like, we don't want to do that because we've heard and we've spoken to XYZ, and this is the information we were given. So
now I'm curious for both of you, like in a job like this, where does the creative payoff come? Like, where is sort of that moment of satisfaction? Like when someone signs the line, when someone says yes, like what is the creative payoff from this job?
Well, I think first and foremost, if it's a role where someone's auditioning, it's just seeing them be consistent, take notes, maybe improve each time they come back, because usually we'll get a self-tape, then there'll be a Zoom producer callback, and then a screen test, and there might be a couple of extra things in there. So to see someone who's consistent, who has maybe thought about the role a little more and added a little more nuance each time, that's always fun. But getting that call from the studio and the network that they have approved them and they're excited about them is the greatest. And then seeing it on screen and hearing, like with Shrinking, the feedback that we are getting from our friends and family, as well as people in the industry and all of that, has been overwhelmingly positive. And it's the greatest ride to be on. And I think it's the best ride that Brett and I have been on so far in our careers. And it's so rewarding, and it really just lifts your spirits and makes, as difficult as casting can be. And this one was super time consuming. The idea of a work day was like not a thing, because we were starting early, ending late, getting calls late, having to roll with the punches. And that's what it is in this day and age when you have a cell phone and you're available at all times. And with Bill, he was working on 3 shows at once. He was working on Ted Lasso. He was working on Bad Monkey. He would be in different time zones, as well as like Brett Goldstein, who also created the show. So we had to be available all the time. And, it was, I would say also great to deliver the news that people were approved. Like, these were our choices and these people were approved. So
it's also really gratifying, kind of going off what Debbie was saying, when you are going through the process with an actor who's not, say, just an offer, who's someone who's coming in, who's going on tape, who's going through the steps, and then to see them get that part, that has always been, I think, for both of us, one of the most gratifying things, whether we were in the room or not. Like when back in the day, and I can remember even as far back as Scrubs, when sometimes you'd have the network would say in the room, "They're our choice," and you'd bring the actor in and say, "You got the part." That was like that's an incredible moment, and that everyone sees what you've seen from the beginning, like from the whole way up. Everybody's like, "Wow, that person's amazing," and that doesn't change whether you're on Zoom or whether you're live. There's something so gratifying when everyone gets it, and then when that actor knows, oh my God, I got it. That's fantastic. It's the closest thing to getting the role yourself, I think, because we do get invested, and we do get invested when you spend time going through the process with some of these actors, and you are sitting with them and going over notes and watching them take adjustments, and they're so invested. So it's hard not to just sit back and be like, okay, you really do. It's like it's a great feeling.
I mean, I've got to imagine that's probably no truer than with someone like Lukita, because I mean, obviously she's so good in the show, but she wasn't on the radar at all. And then when I see this, I was like, who is this? And I started looking up and I see Generation, and I kind of understand now. But I'm curious for you both, like, and I mean, it's always felt to me that there's probably, other than myself and, the critics, you guys probably have to do the most watching in general than maybe, people even understand. Like, how much of your sort of daily process is just, turning on, show X to find actor Y?
Yeah, I mean, I personally watch a ton of TV. I love it. I always have. So it is not something that I do reluctantly or that feels like work. If anything, I can always use it as an excuse, like, well, but it's research. And so I'm doing my work while lounging on my couch, eating my bonbons. That's what's so fun. And I was saying to a friend of mine this morning, I was like, our phones are our friends. We can sit by the TV and we can open our like female actor list, male actor list. And like, I just jot stuff down. And it's so fun to go back and look at like who you saw for the first time and when it was. And now they're like some big star, and there was something, some little sign when they were a guest star on something or a co-star, and you knew they had what it takes. And again, it's a tough business, and sometimes there are droughts that you go through, and the people that can weather them and keep pushing forward, it's really wonderful to watch, because it's really hard. I mean, my hats are off to actors who are, even before the pandemic, it just has always been a hard business, and you have to love it to do it.
For sure.
And our business isn't so dissimilar,
No.
And we have, the ebbs and flows. And so to get to work on a show like Shrinking is just great.
Now, I mean, just to put a bow on this, I've got to ask you both, is there anything about the casting process that maybe the public on the outside looking in wouldn't expect or don't know about the process?
I mean, I'm sure they don't know what it takes to figure out how to audition, meaning, we go through a script, we have to pick specific scenes that will highlight the actor, that if this is this is a dark comedy, so we need to find scenes that have those dramatic moments as well as the comedic beats, and make sure that an actor can hit that stuff and pull us to both sides. And so I don't know what people know. All I know is my family's very confused about what I do and how it works, and always has been. But I think that they probably have no idea how many times some people audition. Sometimes people have to audition 9 times to get a role, and that's just what it is. If sides change, or we add a scene, or we need to see chemistry with someone. There are a lot of steps to the process. And at the end of the day, there are steps that are important because we need to make sure it's right. Otherwise, we're going to be back to ground zero or have a failed show. Nobody wants that. So you have to do what you have to do to make sure it's right. And hopefully everyone is invested enough to know that we're asking for a reason.
Yeah, I would say, and to add to that, I think people I think the job is a lot more political than people would expect. And by that, I mean, you're a conduit between the studio, the network, the agents, the managers, and your producers.
Sure.
And you're pulled into a lot of different sides. So you very quickly begin to learn how to facilitate stuff, how to spin stuff. And I don't think people realize that. I think a lot of people think our job is, we get to sit with stars all day and we get to, do, and it's not really that. And sometimes there's a lot of scrambling. There's a lot of, things that happen in the last minute. There's a lot of times that we don't have scripts, and there's a lot of times that we're given pages and things change. And so it's an interesting job in that, yes, no 2 days are exactly the same, because something always different is coming down the pike, whether that's another script that's arriving, or that there's a fire that needs put out, or whether someone got sick on set, so we have to redo the schedule because we're not going to be able to shoot any scenes with X, Y, and Z until this is finished. So there's always something. It's and so there's much more kind of complexity to the job than I think people assume at the outset. But that's what also makes it fun, is because it's not, I'm going into the office, I know I have to do X, Y, it does change. So.
No, and I mean, I love that you put it that way, because I mean, it's so true. There is a chaos to show business that you can't kind of explain to people unless you kind of put them in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But again, it's one of those things that it's so alluring and it's so magical, and it's all why we're here in our various functions. But I mean, honestly, Debbie, Brett, just thank you for the work on this, because I mean, again, this is such a fantastic show. I think you and the entire team have done some really good work here, and I mean, touch wood, there's going to be more of them, because I can't wait.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
really
David.
Appreciate it. And it was really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you both, and
Yeah,
thanks
really
again for the
nice to
time
meet
today.
you.
Really.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.